The Russian approach before this invasion had been to use disinformation, misinformation, and sometimes telling the truth in weird ways to generate the following effect: who really knows?
Hmm.
That's been the standard that has been sufficient for Putin a high percentage of the time. And unfortunately, the rising skepticism and mistrust within our own society has been made that pushing a rock downhill. We so mistrust each other at this point that we're inclined to say, well, who really knows? And so when the Russians are creating these opportunities to say, well, who really knows? The point of that is so that we'll say, well, who really knows? So why should we get involved in this? So
Hmm.
that instead of reacting to the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, which is what actually happened, the Russian military invaded Ukraine in 2014. It seized and then annexed Ukrainian territory in 2014. And then it continued a war in Ukraine from 2014 to the present. The Russian military was doing all of that. Instead of that, we've been talking about ceasefire. I have a sour joke for you, Jordan. I've used this joke right up until the invasion. What do you call it when the armored, mechanized artillery, missile, aircraft, naval, and special forces troops of two countries fight each other? In Ukraine, we call it a ceasefire because that's what had been going
So
on.
by sowing chaos and confusion at the level of information, you sap the moral unity of the people
Exactly.
that you're attacking. So they can't unite to justify to themselves even a singular and effective response.
What you do is you isolate the victim, which is what the Russians have done or had done. They isolated Ukraine so that instead of seeing Ukraine simply as the victim of a Russian invasion in 2014, which is what happened, in the West, we've had a lot of conversations about, well, are the Ukrainians living up to their obligations under Minsk? Well, are the Ukrainians doing enough here? And there, you get in rapidly into this, well, faults on both sides kind of thing, which
Hmm. Hmm.
paralyzes Western response. There aren't faults on both sides. Faults on one side here. There are faults on the side of the Russians who invaded in 2014 and have invaded again. That's
So
faults on one side.
that's the consequence of an injudicious even-handedness.
Right, exactly.
That's a tough one because there's the strong moral impulse to even-handedness and also to self-correction, right? To
Right,
examine yourself for your own faults, which we
right.
seem to be more than good enough in some sense in the West.
Yep.
But that can be capitalized on. And it's an interesting moral conundrum, isn't it? Because there's a time for decisive action that requires a certain level of moral certainty, and that means you're not even-handed under those conditions. So